Welcome to r/entitled people, where we share stories from your lives about people who think the rules don't apply to them and they should get what they want. Thank you, friends, for subscribing to the channel and for so many likes. And today we have two great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story, Standing Up Against Entitled and Racist Mother, Supermarket Showdown. The second story, Defying the Odds, How I Triumphed Over a $1 million Lawsuit and an Unjust Non-Compete. The first story is, Entitled and Racist Mother and Daughter Harass an Older Woman at the Supermarket. Firstly, I cannot believe I'm writing a post here. I've come across many entitled people in my life, and you just disregard it and move on. As for this story, I'm still shocked at what I saw, and thought I would share it with you all here. Yesterday, I went to my local supermarket, grabbed the items I needed, and headed to the till to pay. I was behind an older woman who was not white. I absolutely detest that I have to point that out, but you will understand why shortly. The lady in front of me began loading her items. I asked if she needed some help as she seemed to struggle. It was then I realized English was not a language she could speak well. Fortunately, I took a guess at what language she spoke and was correct. I used to specialize in immigration law, and throughout my time as an immigration lawyer, I did manage to learn different languages. This helped as I would not always need to hire an interpreter. We spoke a little and she honestly seemed absolutely lovely. As I was helping her unload her shopping, a woman and her daughter line up behind me. In the words of the Joker in The Dark Knight, and here we go. Immediately, the woman begins to make huffing and puffing sounds as though everyone is an inconvenience. I ignored her and continued to help unload her items, as the customer in front had nearly all of her items scanned. As I'm loading items on the belt, the daughter of the lady behind me begins to pull at the scarf of the lady in front of me. She's tugging and begins to say, "Take it off." I look at her mom, hoping she will step in and stop this abhorrent behavior, but nothing. I can tell the lady is scared and trying her best to hold her scarf, but this child is tugging and making vile comments, such as, "This is not allowed, you need to take it off." At this point, I've had enough, and it's evident her mother will not be stepping in. So I tell her to stop it, and if she does not, I will get security to make sure she stops. I also tell her that her behavior is not nice, and would she like someone tugging at her clothing? She tells me to be quiet, and I then step in between her and the woman and sort of become a human shield over her to stop her. I did not want to touch the child. The lady grabs hold of my hand and it's shaking. I feel so awful for her. I tell the cashier and she has belled for security. I relay this information to the lady in her language so that she can find some comfort in knowing security is coming. Enter the mother of the child, who finally decides that she does have a voice and can indeed speak up. She calls out the older lady for not speaking English, and then asks me why I'm defending her and what language was I speaking to her. Then she asks why I, as a white woman, was speaking another language. I know. I go ahead and tell her what her daughter was doing, and that the behavior was not acceptable. I also told her that I found it shameful that she did not stop her daughter. She then tells me her daughter has autism. She's allowed to do this as it helps her stay calm. I refuse to accept that as a justification. Her daughter must be 7 at least. It's entirely deplorable. That then starts her tirade of how wrong I am for defending someone like her and her people. How wrong I was for stopping her daughter and that I probably hate being white. Fortunately, at this point, the security officers have arrived and can see and hear her making racist comments. One officer takes her trolley and asks both the mother and daughter to follow him. The daughter is kicking and screaming, and the mother is swearing for all to hear as they follow him. The second security officer then speaks to the cashier, and then asks me what happened. I explain the situation and he requests that I translate an apology on behalf of the store to the lady, and that they will issue her a voucher at the customer service desk. He also asks if she would like to take this matter further, in which case we will need to come with him and make statements. I relay this information to her and ask her what she would like to do. She declines and says she's humiliated enough and would just like to go home. Whilst I had hoped we would take the issue further, I completely respect her choice and understood how demeaning it must have been for her. I offer to pay for her shopping, and she declines. I insist further, and the cashier allows it. She is incredibly grateful and had said some wonderfully kind things to me in appreciation. I did ask her if she would like me to drop her home, but she said no, she would take the bus. I refused and said if she was not comfortable in my car, that I will order and pay for a cab. Again, she was grateful and so wonderfully nice to me that I almost cried. I think at this point, my emotions were all over the place, because hearing her say how humiliated she felt was heartbreaking. No one should ever be treated in such a manner. We did part ways, but I gave her my number and said if I could ever be of help to let me know. About what happened to the mother and her spawn. They banned her indefinitely. There are security cameras everywhere, so the entire interaction has been recorded, so she certainly could not decline anything. To any who may be wondering how the girl was pulling her scarf, it was one that was draped over her head, and the rest around her body. It would be described as a dupatta in most South Asian culture. I've seen many people behave like a-holes online and offline, but honestly, witnessing what I did yesterday and hearing what I heard come from the child, it was evidently all learned behavior. Truthfully, it is such a shame. That hate is what she is teaching her child. It's unbelievable how horrible and intemperate people can be in society sometimes. This mother and her daughter were clearly out of control, and their persistent and aggressive behavior is truly creepy. You are to be congratulated for standing up for the poor old woman and standing up to this inhumane aggression. But what really stunned me was this mother's persistent ignorance and racism. How can you teach your child such disgusting things as hatred and racial bias? It is incomprehensible and sad. What is important is that action was taken to punish this woman and her daughter for their horrible behavior. They deserved their store ban, and it's good that incidents like this don't go unpunished. You certainly did the right thing in defending the old woman and providing her with support. Your kindness and compassion are important. The world needs more people like you who are willing to fight hatred and racism. I hope this event will be a cause for reflection for those who witness this horrific scene. The second story is a story that hopefully inspires you. I've never shared this story publicly and only a few close friends know, though court records exist. I'm not going to blast it all over because it doesn't matter who is who here, but here's the very long story of how me, a lowly underpaid overworked peon, won against a lawsuit levied against me for $1 million and being banned from working in an entire industry. Prepare for a long read. The year is 2016, month December. I've been with my employer for nearly a year, was recently married and doing very well for myself. I was working at a car dealership selling, was eventually moved over to internet sales. Then I took over an entire section of the internet department where I was able to really max out my pay plan, sell 30 cars a month, and never meet a single customer face to face. The last 3 months of the year I averaged about $7,000 in total with commissions. This will be important if you don't already see where this is going. Near the end of December of 2016, management of the dealership approached me impressed with my complete turnaround of this singular department, and the knowledge I had demonstrated and offered me a promotion to be a wholesale used car buyer. They promised increased money and further learning the car business. Sweet deal. Didn't talk much on pay, but they said they would keep my draw at $3,000 a month, meaning I have to cover $3,000 in sales or commissions before I can earn more. I asked for $4,500, reasoning my past performance over the past quarter, and stated this was more than a reasonable ask. They declined, reiterating I would make so much more money. Red flag number 1. Part of the new position, I had to sign some paperwork. New pay plan sheet, all the fun stuff, but something that stood out was a non-compete that was placed in front of me. Red flag number 2. And I began to thoroughly read it as anyone should. The manager over the buying department began ridiculing me. Red flag number 3, 4, and 5 for reading it, stating that it was standard in the business. I noted in this non-compete that it was rather generic, lacked defining terms or information concerning trade secrets, did not define competition, and stated that as part of this new role, I would have an increase in pay equal to an increase in responsibility. Red flag number 8 million at this point, and no numeric value is placed here. The owners of the dealership were always super nice to me, though demanding as any car dealership would be, but I never missed my goals or KPIs I had to hit for me to always make money. After a month of intense learning and training, I was more or less released on my own to start buying cars. The pay plan was weighted towards me buying cars direct, or via a buy it now method versus purchasing at auction, where I would only earn between $10 to $20 per purchase. I obviously avoided purchasing cars via this method and focused on buying cars that earned me the most money on my pay plan. I expressed my displeasure in this, stating it did not make sense for me to continue and would rather move back to selling cars. They declined, promptly changed my pay plan, and pleaded with me to give it some more time. I agreed, and the following month I made $4,500. I was still disappointed as I was putting in significantly more work by this point, and began looking for other jobs after seeing the sales reports on my purchases. In the month of March, my car purchases grossed the dealer over $120,000. Not to mention that my boss was mildly verbally and physically abusive, and I refused to play into it. On top of this, I began taking on other job roles that eventually became me holding about 4 other positions and titles. Before I left, I gave them a month notice, so they would have plenty of time to find a replacement. After fully training the replacement in one of my job areas of bidding trade in vehicles of customers, I learned that they were actually paying him double, $6K US dollars a month. By now, I was peeved. I eventually found a few other jobs that gave me offers, but decided to go to another car dealership to still buy cars that was over an hour south of where I was. They offered better pay, hours, benefits were nicer, just everything. So no-brainer. I start going to auctions in person and taking over as the primary buyer in lane, instead of the owner of this new dealership. To no surprise, the other dealership sees me and calls me out one day. My previous coworker, who was also a buyer, called the owner of the dealership I formerly worked for and came up to me and told me that the owner wanted to speak to me. Once I picked up, it was a full-on verbal assault of threats and everything under the sun. I knew where the path was leading at this point. Many cease and desist letters were fired out, threats sent out, and eventually official notice of a summons. I told the dealer I worked for to not worry, fire me so he can relieve himself of any hand in this, and I'll take it on myself. He refused and then doubled down and countersued the other dealer. Truly, the best part of this story is what happened within the courtroom at this point, as it was pure comedy of the judge ripping apart the other dealership's attorney, and me laying into their attorney as well, while I was on the stand, but I'll spare the dirty details. I testified for 2 hours straight, which was beyond exhausting, and took all 5 of my brain cells working on overtime. At the end, they requested a trial by jury, as the judge had deemed no fault on my part outside of being dumb for signing the non-compete and taking a job directly in competition. His words, not mine. A few months roll by as discovery was open and they couldn't find some random documents that disputed my pay in their favor. To no surprise, because there were none. So it was eventually dropped. I declined to pursue our countersuit further, as it would have been a hard battle to justify lost wages when the only thing signed was a very vague contract stating I would simply get paid more. In the end, I've stayed in the automotive industry and made some great career advancements and met great people and friends, so I look back on that time as a great learning experience that I carry with me daily. The moral of the story? Read non-competes thoroughly, knowing that most can't be enforced, especially in right-to-work states, and that your employer will always try to screw you over no matter what. You're just a number to them that produces more numbers, and they view you as easily replaceable. This story is simply stunning. How could anyone expect someone like you, threatened with $1 million lawsuit and a ban from an entire industry, to be able to prevail? But you did, and that's incredibly impressive. There were many red flags from the time you were hired to the end of the lawsuit, and your ability to sort through them and handle this situation is a true accomplishment. Your decision to honestly and professionally take responsibility and defend your employer against a counter lawsuit speaks volumes about your moral values and integrity. It's also a lesson to all of us about the importance of reading contracts carefully, especially those such as prohibitions on competition, and being prepared to defend our rights when they're violated. Your tenacity and determination inspire respect, and provide a good lesson for all those facing similar situations. Employers generally try to protect their interests, but it's important to remember that your rights and interests also matter. You overcame this ordeal, and went on to have an impressive career in the automotive industry. This story can serve as an inspiration to many to fight for themselves and their rights. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to know when the new video comes out, and hit the like button to support the channel.